Have you ever thought that one small decision in HR could trigger the collapse of an entire company? I lived through that moment. They thought cutting my hours would weaken me, make me disappear into the background like a faded photograph. But that single act of corporate cruelty lit a fire they could never extinguish. What started as their power play became the catalyst for my revenge. A revenge so complete, so devastating, that by the time they realized their mistake, their empire was already crumbling beneath their feet. My name is Caroline Hart, and at 32, I thought I had it all figured out. Senior consultant at Ardent Strategies, Inc., one of Chicago's most prestigious business consulting firms. The gleaming 40-story tower in the Loop District, the marble lobbies, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. It all screamed success. For 5 years, I'd poured my soul into this place, believing that hard work and brilliance would be enough to crack through that invisible ceiling. God, how naive I was. The morning it all began started like any other. November rain pelted against the windows of our 20th floor office as I reviewed the Patterson Industries merger proposal I'd been orchestrating for 3 months. My heels clicked against the polished floor as I made my way to the conference room, laptop bag slung over my shoulder, coffee in hand, the picture of a modern professional woman on the rise. Morning, Caroline. Robert Larkin, our managing director, barely glanced up from his phone as I entered. The other partners were already seated around the mahogany table, their faces a blur of middle-aged white masculinity that had become so familiar, so suffocating. I'd grown accustomed to being the only woman in these meetings. At first, it felt like an honor, a sign that I'd made it. But slowly, insidiously, I began to notice things. How my ideas would be dismissed, only to be praised when repeated by Michael or James 5 minutes later. How client dinners somehow always happened at clubs where women weren't members. How promotions seemed to slip through my fingers like water. Always going to someone who just had that extra something. That extra something, apparently, was a Y chromosome. Excellent work on the Patterson proposal, Robert said, finally acknowledging my presence. My heart lifted for a moment. Recognition. Finally. Michael will be taking the lead on the presentation next week. The words hit me like ice water. I'm sorry. What? This is my project. I've been working with Patterson's team for months. And you've done wonderful prep work, Robert interrupted, that patronizing smile spreading across his face like oil. But we need someone with more gravitas for the actual pitch. You understand. I understood perfectly. I understood that my 80-hour weeks meant nothing, that my Harvard MBA was just decoration, that in their eyes, I would always be the girl playing dress-up in a man's world. But I smiled. I always smiled. Of course. The meeting continued, but I heard nothing else. My mind was racing, calculating, processing 5 years of subtle dismissals and not-so-subtle insults. The time they'd asked me to take notes in a client meeting where I was supposed to be presenting. The Christmas party where Robert's wife asked if I was someone's secretary. The promotion that went to Brad, who couldn't tell a P&L statement from a grocery list but had the right golf handicap. As the meeting ended and everyone filed out, Robert asked me to stay behind. My stomach tightened. In this world, being asked to stay behind was either very good or very bad. There was no middle ground. Caroline, he began, settling back into his leather chair with the casual authority of someone who'd never had to fight for anything. We need to discuss your role here. My role? I kept my voice steady, professional. Inside, alarm bells were ringing. The board has been reviewing our staffing structure, given the current economic climate and the need to optimize our resources. He paused, clearly enjoying the power of making me wait. We're reducing your hours to part-time, effective next Monday, 20 hours a week, maximum. Of course, your benefits will be adjusted accordingly. The room seemed to tilt. Part-time. After 5 years of giving everything to this company, part-time. When junior associates fresh out of college were getting full packages. This is about the Patterson project, isn't it? The words escaped before I could stop them. Robert's eyes hardened. This is about business, Caroline, nothing personal. You can take it or leave it. Take it or leave it. The ultimate corporate threat, delivered with a smile. They knew I had a mortgage, student loans, a life built around this salary. They were counting on my fear, my need for security, my willingness to accept scraps from their table. I'll need to think about it, I managed to say. You have until Friday. He was already checking his phone, dismissing me from his attention as easily as he dismissed my career. I walked back to my office, my soon-to-be former office, apparently, on legs that felt like water. Through the glass walls, I could see my colleagues going about their day, oblivious to the earthquake that had just shattered my world. Or maybe not oblivious. Maybe they all knew. Maybe they'd been laughing behind my back all along. As I sat at my desk, staring at the Chicago skyline through the rain-streaked windows, something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there, raw and burning, but underneath it, something else was growing. Something harder, sharper, more dangerous. They thought they were crushing me. They thought I would accept their insult, grateful for whatever crumbs they threw my way. They had no idea what they'd just set in motion. This wasn't the end of Caroline Hart's story. This was the beginning of their nightmare. The first night after Robert's announcement, I didn't sleep. I sat in my Lincoln Park apartment, staring at the ceiling while the city lights painted shadows on the walls. 20 hours a week. The number echoed in my mind like a funeral bell. That would barely cover my mortgage, let alone the student loans that still haunted me from Harvard. They knew exactly what they were doing, death by 1,000 financial cuts. By morning, rage had replaced shock. I walked into Arden's offices that Tuesday with my head high, but inside, I was documenting everything, every slight, every dismissive glance, every meeting where I was suddenly not needed. The pattern became crystal clear, like looking at one of those magic eye pictures that suddenly snaps into focus. Caroline, could you grab coffee for the client meeting? Michael asked that afternoon, not even looking up from his screen. 6 months ago, I would have done it, telling myself it was about being a team player. Now, I saw it for what it was. I'm preparing the quarterly analysis you asked for, I replied coolly. I'm sure Brad can handle the coffee run. Michael's head snapped up, surprise flickering across his face. Brad's busy with updating his fantasy football lineup. I glanced pointedly at Brad's screen, visible from where I stood. I have 3 client reports due by 5. Perhaps someone with less critical work could handle beverages. The silence in the office was deafening. I'd broken the unspoken rule, know your place, girl. Wednesday's partnership meeting was even worse. I wasn't invited, of course. Part-timers didn't get seats at the big table, but I could see them through the glass walls, laughing over something Robert was saying, probably celebrating their brilliant cost-cutting move. Through the grapevine, I learned they'd already redistributed my major accounts. Patterson Industries went to Michael, naturally. The Thompson Group to James. Even my smallest clients, the ones I'd cultivated from nothing, were parceled out like party favors. It's just business, Sandra from HR told me when I went to discuss the transition. She couldn't quite meet my eyes. The partners feel this arrangement better serves our clients' needs. And what about my needs? I asked. 5 years of exceeding every metric, bringing in $2 million in new business last quarter alone. And this is how. Caroline. Sandra's voice turned sharp, the fake sympathy evaporating. The decision has been made. You can accept the new terms or seek opportunities elsewhere. Those are your options. Opportunities elsewhere, as if they hadn't already poisoned the well. I'd made subtle inquiries at other firms, only to be told they weren't hiring at my level right now. Robert's network ran deep in Chicago's consulting world. They weren't just cutting my hours, they were boxing me in, making sure I had nowhere to run. Thursday night found me in my apartment again, laptop open, creating spreadsheets of my finances. If I cut everything non-essential, moved to a cheaper place, maybe sold my car, I could survive for 3 months. 4, if I was lucky. The humiliation burned in my throat. from rising star to calculating whether I could afford groceries. I opened LinkedIn, scrolling through the curated success stories of my peers. Jake Morrison, who'd started at Ardent the same year as me, had just made senior partner. His qualification? Being Robert's golf buddy. Emma Chen, no, Emma Watson, who'd been promoted to director at another firm, posted about breaking barriers while carefully avoiding any mention of her father owning half the company. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother in Ohio. "How's my successful daughter? Dad's bragging about you to everyone at church." I stared at the message, unable to respond. How could I tell them that their daughter, the one who'd conquered Chicago, was being discarded like yesterday's newspaper? Friday morning arrived with brutal clarity. Decision day. I dressed carefully, my best suit, the Louboutins I'd bought to celebrate my last Phantom promotion, the watch my parents gave me for graduation. If I was going to accept humiliation, I'd do it in armor. But as I stood in my bathroom mirror, applying lipstick with steady hands, something my grandmother once told me surfaced in my memory. "Sweet girl, when they knock you down, you don't just get back up. You rise so high they have to crane their necks to see you." I walked into Robert's office at precisely 9 a.m. "Caroline," he smiled, already savoring his victory. "Have you made your decision?" I sat down without being invited, crossing my legs deliberately. "I have." "Excellent. Sandra has the paperwork ready." "I'll take the 20 hours, I interrupted, watching surprise flicker across his face. He'd expected me to quit, to run away with my tail between my legs. But I wanted in writing that I retain my consultant title and can pursue independent contracts outside of those 20 hours. Robert's eyes narrowed. "Independent contracts?" "Unless Ardent plans to pay me a full salary for part-time work, I'll need to supplement my income. Surely you understand, it's just business." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. He knew what I was doing, using their own corporate speak against them, but he'd backed himself into a corner. Refusing would be admitting this was personal, not professional. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth, "but any independent work cannot conflict with Ardent's interests or clients." "Of course not," I lied smoothly. "I would never dream of it." As I signed the papers, my hand was steady, but my mind was already racing. They thought they'd broken me, turned me into a part-time nobody who'd eventually fade away. They had no idea they'd just lit the fuse on their own destruction. Walking out of Robert's office, I heard him on the phone, laughing about something. "Handled," he said to whoever was on the other end. "She took it like a good girl." A good girl. I smiled to myself as I packed up my office, taking only what was mine, leaving behind 5 years of loyalty and dedication. They wanted a good girl? They were about to meet a wolf. My office was now a corner of my studio apartment in Logan Square, a far cry from the Loop's gleaming towers. I'd downsized everything, sold the luxury condo, traded the BMW for a used Honda, even said goodbye to my cleaning service. But as I sat at my secondhand desk that first Monday of my new life, something unexpected happened. I felt free. Hart Consulting, LLC. The name looked beautiful on the business cards I'd printed at FedEx. Simple, clean, professional. Nothing like the pretentious Latin names Ardent's competitors favored. I'd filed the LLC paperwork the same day I'd signed those part-time papers, using my last savings to cover the legal fees. The first 2 weeks were brutal. I sent out 50 proposals and got 50 rejections. Most never responded. The ones who did gave polite variations of, "We're happy with our current consultants." I knew Robert's influence was at work. Whispered warnings at country clubs. Casual mentions over drinks that Caroline Hart was difficult to work with or unstable. My 20 hours at Ardent were deliberately humiliating. They had me doing intern-level work, formatting PowerPoints, fact-checking reports, scheduling meetings for the real consultants. Michael would walk by my desk, my new desk, crammed in the corner by the supply closet, and smirk. "How's the independent consulting going, Caroline?" he'd ask loudly, making sure everyone heard. Land any big clients yet? I'd smile sweetly. Still building. Rome wasn't built in a day. No, he'd laugh. But it did burn in one. Let them laugh. Every night after my humiliating half-days at Ardent, I was working until 3 a.m., refining my approach, studying market gaps Ardent ignored, building something entirely different from their bloated, old boys club model. The breakthrough came in week 3, from the most unexpected source. I was nursing a coffee at a networking event in Wicker Park, one of those startup meetups Ardent would never deign to attend, when I overheard 2 women talking about their company's growing pains. We need strategic guidance, but every consultant wants $100,000 just to tell us what we already know. One said, frustration clear in her voice. I turned around. What if someone could give you actionable insights for a fraction of that? That's how I met Evelyn Grant, CEO of Next Gen Tech, a 3-year-old company making waves in educational software. Evelyn was everything Ardent's typical clients weren't: young, female, Black, and absolutely brilliant. She'd been turned down by 3 traditional firms, including Ardent, who deemed her company too small to be worth their time. You worked at Ardent? Evelyn's eyes narrowed when she saw my resume. They told me they didn't have bandwidth for emerging companies. They don't, I said honestly. But I do. And unlike them, I won't charge you for fancy lunches and golf outings you'll never be invited to. She laughed, a real laugh, not the polite corporate chuckle I'd grown used to. Show me what you've got. I spent the entire weekend preparing a preliminary analysis of NextGen's position. Not the bloated 100-page documents Ardent favored, full of charts that said nothing. Just 20 pages of surgical insights, where they were bleeding money, 3 untapped market opportunities, and a realistic 18-month growth strategy. This is incredible, Evelyn said when we met that Tuesday. You found inefficiencies my own CFO missed. What's your rate? I named a figure that was a third of Ardent's minimum, still enough to keep me afloat, but low enough to be irresistible. Deal. She shook my hand. But Caroline, you're undervaluing yourself. I'm building something, I told her. Price comes later. Right now, I need believers. Evelyn became more than a client. She became my champion. She introduced me to her network, other misfits who didn't fit Ardent's client profile. The Latino owner of a successful food distribution company who was tired of consultants who didn't understand his market. A female-founded biotech startup that needed strategic planning without the condescension. A second-generation Asian American running his family's manufacturing business who wanted modernization without losing the company's soul. Each client was someone Ardent had dismissed as not worth pursuing or too complicated. Their loss became my foundation. By month 2, I had 6 clients and was pulling 18-hour days. My tiny apartment became command central. Whiteboards covered every wall. Client files stacked on every surface. My printer running constantly. I was exhausted, exhilarated, and more alive than I'd felt in years. The best part was showing up for my 20 hours at Ardent, knowing what they didn't. While they had me filing reports, I was building an empire. While they laughed at my little side project, my bank account was finally recovering. While they thought they'd neutralized a threat, they were actually training their replacement. Caroline, you look tired, Robert commented one afternoon, fake concern dripping from his voice. Not burning yourself out with that little consulting hobby, are you? Just passionate about my work, I replied, thinking about the proposal I'd sent that morning to a company Ardent had been courting for months. You taught me that success requires sacrifice. He preened at that, the fool. Glad to see you're finally learning your place in the business world. My place, I smiled, thinking about Evelyn's text that morning. Her board wanted to increase my contract, and she was recommending me to 3 other CEOs. Yes, I agreed, gathering the files he'd dumped on me to organize. I'm definitely learning my place. If only he knew that his place, all of their places, were about to become history. The foundation was set, the clients were aligned. Hart Consulting was no longer just a dream scribbled on a napkin, it was a loaded weapon. And I was about to pull the trigger. 6 months into my dual existence, everything changed with a single phone call. Caroline Hart. The voice was unfamiliar, authoritative. This is Marcus Williams from the Chicago Business Journal. We're doing a feature on emerging consultants who are disrupting traditional models. Your name keeps coming up. I nearly dropped my coffee. The Chicago Business Journal was required reading in every boardroom in the city. I'm flattered, but no buts. Evelyn Grant says you saved her company $3 million in 6 months. The Morales Group credits you with their expansion into 3 new states. That's not luck, Ms. Hart. That's talent. The article ran 2 weeks later. The headline made me laugh out loud. The Anti-Consultant. How Caroline Hart is revolutionizing business advisory services. There was my photo, taken in Evelyn's offices, surrounded by actual clients instead of staged corporate props. The article detailed my approach: transparent pricing, measurable results, no bloat, no boys club, no BS. The morning it published, my phone exploded, 60 emails before 9 a.m. My website crashed from traffic. LinkedIn connection requests poured in from CEOs, founders, and, most satisfyingly, Ardent's own clients. I walked into Ardent that morning for my mandatory 20 hours. And the atmosphere was electric. Everyone had seen the article. The junior associates looked at me with new respect. The senior partners avoided eye contact. And Robert was purple with rage. My office. Now! He barked as I passed his door. I took my time walking in, savoring his fury. The article was spread across his desk, my face smiling up from the pages. This is a violation of your contract, he spat. Soliciting clients while employed? I haven't solicited a single Ardent client, I interrupted calmly. Every client featured in that article is someone you rejected. I have the emails to prove it. Evelyn Grant, you told her NextGen was too ethnic for Ardent's portfolio. The Morales Group? Not sophisticated enough, were your exact words. Should I continue? His face went from purple to white. He knew I was right. Worse, he knew I had documentation. You're trying to damage our reputation? By succeeding where you failed? I laughed, actually laughed in his face. Robert, I'm not competing with Ardent. I'm serving the clients you threw away, the ones you deemed beneath you. Turns out, they have money too. Lots of it. Get out of my office. Gladly. But I'll be back tomorrow for my scheduled 20 hours, contract and all. The weeks following the article were a blur. I hired my first employee, Maria, a brilliant strategist who'd been passed over for promotion at Deloitte 3 times. Then came James Park, a data analyst whose insights were sharper than anyone I'd met at Ardent. Within 2 months, Hart Consulting had a team of 8, all of us working out of a proper office in River North. Not fancy, but professional, clean, hours. The cosmic joke was that I still had to show up at Ardent for those 20 hours. But now, instead of humiliation, it was intelligence gathering. I listened to their panic about losing mid-tier clients. I watched them scramble to appear more diverse in their marketing. I documented every disparaging comment about women and minority-owned businesses, building a file that grew thicker each week. The real victory came in month 8. Thompson Industries, one of my old accounts that had been given to James, called me directly. Ms. Hart, we've been following your work. Their CEO, Patricia Thompson, said, James is fine, but he doesn't understand our vision the way you did. We want to transfer our account to Hart Consulting. This was it. An Ardent client. Approaching me, I could have said yes immediately, but I was playing a longer game. I'm honored, Patricia, but that might create complications with my current part-time arrangement at Ardent. Let me see what I can do. What I did was perfectly legal and absolutely devastating. I resigned from Ardent, giving them the required 2 weeks' notice. Then I waited exactly 1 day after my final 20 hours were complete to accept Thompson Industries as a client. Then Brennan Manufacturing followed. Then Richardson Retail Group. The dam broke. In 1 month, Hart Consulting absorbed 6 former Ardent clients, representing about 12 million in annual billing. Not because I stole them, because they chose us. They chose transparency over smoke and mirrors. They chose results over relationships. They chose the future over the past. The local business media had a field day. David Slay's Goliath, Hart Consulting's meteoric rise ran in Crane's Chicago business. The Tribune's headline was even better. From part-time to prime-time, how one woman built a consulting empire. But my favorite was the small mention in an industry newsletter. Ardent Strategies reported a 15% revenue decline in Q3, attributed to increased competition and market shifts. Market shifts. That's what they were calling me now, a force of nature they couldn't control or understand. Maria walked into my office one afternoon with a grin. You'll never guess who just called asking for a job. Who? Michael. From Ardent. Says he's looking for new opportunities and admires what you've built. We looked at each other for a moment, then burst out laughing. The same Michael who'd asked me to fetch coffee, who'd mocked my little consulting hobby, now wanted to work for me. Tell him we're not hiring, I said. We only work with people who showed respect when it wasn't profitable. That night, I stood in my new office, my real office, with windows overlooking the Chicago River, and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Hart Consulting was billing more in a month than I'd made in a year at Ardent. We had 12 employees, 32 clients, and a waiting list. But I wasn't done. Success was sweet, but revenge? Revenge required something more. It required complete and total destruction of everyone who'd tried to destroy me. The call came on a Tuesday morning in September, almost exactly 1 year after they'd reduced my hours. Ms. Hart, this is David Steinberg from Pinnacle Corporation. We're looking for consulting services for our upcoming merger with Atlas Technologies. It's a complex situation. We need the best. Pinnacle Corporation, a $30 billion giant that had been Ardent's crown jewel client for over a decade. This wasn't just any contract. This was the contract, worth approximately $50 million in fees over 2 years. We're honored you're considering us, Mr. Steinberg. But isn't Ardent handling your strategic consulting? There was a pause. That relationship has become complicated. We need fresh perspectives. The board has specifically requested proposals from 3 firms, McKinsey, your firm, and yes, Ardent. May the best team win. My hand was shaking as I hung up. This was it, the opportunity to face Ardent head-to-head on their own territory. But more than that, it was a chance to take their most precious client, the one they paraded around as proof of their superiority. Team meeting, now, I called out. Within minutes, my conference room was full. Maria, James, and the rest of my core team looked at me expectantly. Pinnacle Corporation wants proposals for their Atlas merger, I said simply. The room erupted. Everyone understood what this meant. David versus Goliath was about to become real. We're competing against Ardent? Maria asked, eyes gleaming. And McKinsey, I added. But yes, Ardent is our real competition. They'll throw everything they have at this. James pulled up his laptop. I have contacts at Atlas. Let me make some calls. I can get us intelligence on McKinsey's approach. Another team member offered. No, I said firmly. We win this clean. No dirty tricks, no insider information. We win because we're better. Period. For 2 weeks, we worked around the clock. But unlike Ardent's approach, throwing 100-page decks at clients, we built something different. An interactive digital presentation that let Pinnacle's board manipulate variables in real time, seeing exactly how different strategies would affect their bottom line. We identified synergies Ardent would never see because they'd never look beyond the boardroom demographics. The night before the presentation, I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. An unknown number had sent a text. Withdraw from Pinnacle or we'll destroy your reputation. You don't know what you're playing with. I knew exactly who it was from. Robert was panicking. The next morning, I dressed in my sharpest suit, not designer, but perfectly tailored. My team looked equally professional as we walked into Pinnacle's boardroom. And there, across the massive conference table, sat Robert, Michael, and four other ardent partners. Robert's smile was sharp as a blade. "Caroline," he said loudly, ensuring everyone heard. "From part-time employee to this. Quite a journey." Several Pinnacle board members looked uncomfortable. He was trying to undermine me before I even began, reminding them of my inferior status. "It has been a journey," I agreed, meeting his eyes. From being told I lacked gravitas to building one of Chicago's fastest-growing consulting firms. Proof that adversity breeds innovation. David Steinberg cleared his throat. Ardent will present first. For 90 minutes, they delivered exactly what I expected. Slide after slide of conservative projections, safe strategies, and, tellingly, a team composition that was entirely white and male, presenting to a board that was increasingly neither. "Questions?" Robert asked confidently. "What about the Asian markets?" a board member asked. "Atlas has significant presence there." Robert's team scrambled, clearly unprepared. "We'd bring in specialist consultants for that region," Michael offered weakly. Then it was our turn. "Before we begin," I said, "I want you to meet our team." I introduced each member, Maria, who'd grown up in a family business and understood operations from the ground up. James, whose data modeling had predicted 3 major market shifts. Sarah, who'd spent 5 years in Shanghai and spoke fluent Mandarin. This merger isn't just about numbers. It's about cultures, markets, and possibilities that only diverse perspectives can see. We didn't use slides. Instead, I handed each board member a tablet. "Every assumption we make is adjustable in real time. You control the variables. We'll show you not just one path, but every possible path, with precise ROI calculations for each." For the next hour, we transformed their understanding of their own merger. We showed them 40 million in savings Ardent had missed because they didn't understand Asian supply chains. We identified risks in European regulations that weren't on anyone's radar. Most importantly, we demonstrated how Atlas's younger, more diverse workforce could revitalize Pinnacle's aging corporate culture, if handled correctly. "This is remarkable." Patricia Chen, no, Patricia Watts, a board member, said. "You found value streams we hadn't even considered." Robert stood abruptly. "I'd like to remind the board that Ms. Hart has only been independent for a year. Ardent has been serving Pinnacle for 10 years, Steinberg interrupted. "And in all that time, you never once suggested we look at the Asian micromarkets Ms. Hart just identified. Those markets alone could add $2 billion to our valuation." The room fell silent. Robert's face was stone. "We'll need a week to decide," Steinberg announced. "Thank you all for your presentations." As we packed up, Robert cornered me by the elevator. "You think you've won?" he hissed. "I'll bury you. Every mistake you've ever made, every client you've ever disappointed." "Like the 3 sexual harassment settlements Ardent quietly paid out last year," I said quietly. "Or the SEC investigation you managed to make disappear. Be very careful, Robert. You're not the only one who can play dirty." His face went white. "You're bluffing." "Try me." The elevator doors opened, and I stepped in, leaving him standing there, mouth agape. 5 days later, Steinberg called personally. "Congratulations, Ms. Hart." The board voted unanimously. Hart Consulting has won the Pinnacle contract. I sat down slowly, the weight of victory almost overwhelming. "Can I ask what made the difference?" "Simple," he said. "Ardent showed us the past. You showed us the future. And frankly, we're tired of paying premium prices for recycled strategies delivered by people who all look and think exactly the same." That afternoon, the news broke across every business publication in Chicago. "Upset of the century. Hart Consulting steals. Pinnacle from Ardent Strategies." But steal was the wrong word. I hadn't stolen anything. I'd simply taken what was mine all along. The anonymous email arrived at the Chicago Tribune at 2:47 a.m. on a Wednesday. By 8 a.m., every major business journalist in the city had the story. By noon, Ardent Strategies was in full crisis mode. I wasn't the whistleblower, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't know who was. Sometimes, when you treat people badly enough, they find their own ways to fight back. Sandra from HR, the one who'd delivered my part-time sentence with such cold efficiency, had apparently kept her own files over the years. The headline was devastating. Ardent Strategies under investigation for systematic financial misreporting. But it was the details that truly damned them. For years, Ardent had been inflating their success rates, claiming credit for client wins they hadn't earned, and, most damaging, billing clients for hours never worked. The investigation revealed a pattern. Junior associates pressured to record 40 billable hours while working 20. The difference, pure profit for the partners. My phone rang. It was Patricia Thompson from Thompson Industries. Caroline, did you know about this when you worked there? I suspected irregularities, I said carefully. It's part of why I was relieved when they reduced my involvement. I couldn't be party to practices I found questionable. We're auditing every invoice Ardent ever sent us. If this is true, we're looking at fraud. Criminal fraud. By the end of the day, 3 more clients had announced audits. The SEC opened a formal investigation, and Robert Larkin was photographed leaving the offices with a box of personal items, his face a mask of fury. I called an all-hands meeting at Hart Consulting that afternoon. I know you're all seeing the news, I began. Some of you might expect me to celebrate, but I won't. What's happening at Ardent is a tragedy, not for the partners who created this culture, but for the innocent employees who are about to lose their jobs, the clients who were deceived, and the profession we all serve. Maria raised her hand. Are we going to pursue their clients? No, I said firmly. We're going to do something better. We're going to offer jobs to every Ardent employee who was let go without cause. The good ones. The ones who were victims of that toxic culture. We're going to build something better with the people they threw away. The press conference I held the next day was calculated to perfection. I stood at the podium in a simple black dress, no jewelry except my grandmother's pearl earrings. Hart Consulting is announcing the Future Leaders Initiative, I said to the assembled media. We're offering positions to 50 displaced professionals from traditional consulting firms, with full benefits and equity participation. We believe the future of consulting lies not in the old boys club, but in diverse voices, ethical practices, and transparent partnerships with our clients. Ms. Hart, a reporter called out, this seems targeted at Ardent's situation. Are you trying to poach their people? I'm trying to save talented professionals from a sinking ship they didn't help sabotage, I replied. When leadership fails, it's not the workers who should suffer. What about accusations that you're capitalizing on Ardent's misfortune? I looked directly into the cameras. For years, Ardent and firms like them have capitalized on keeping talented people down. They reduced my hours, hoping I'd disappear. Instead, I built something better. Now I'm offering the same opportunity to others who've been marginalized, overlooked, or mistreated. That's not capitalizing on misfortune. That's creating fortune from misery. The applications flooded in, not just from Ardent, but from across the industry. Associates who'd been passed over, women who'd hit glass ceilings, people of color who'd been told they didn't have the right fit. Within a week, we'd hired 30 new consultants, including, ironically, 2 junior associates who'd been forced to falsify billing records at Ardent and had documentation to prove it. But the real bombshell came during the second week of the investigation. The FBI raided Ardent's offices, and sources leaked that they'd found evidence of something far worse than financial fraud. Ardent had been selling confidential client information to competitors, a sideline that had netted the partners millions in unreported income. Robert Larkin was arrested at his country club, hauled away in handcuffs in full view of his golf buddies. Michael was picked up at O'Hare, trying to board a flight to Costa Rica. The image of them in orange jumpsuits, appearing for their arraignment, made the front page of every newspaper in Chicago. I was in my office when Evelyn Grant called. Have you seen the news? I have. How does it feel, watching them burn? I thought about it for a moment. You know what? It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like justice. There's a difference. What's the difference? Victory implies I won something from them, but they never had anything I wanted. I built my success despite them. Not because of them. This? I gestured at the news playing silently on my office TV. This is just the universe correcting an imbalance. The next month, Ardent Strategies officially declared bankruptcy. Their remaining clients fled, their assets were frozen, and their reputation was beyond salvage. The building management company removed their name from the lobby directory, 40 floors of shame condensed into a blank space where their brass letters used to gleam. I stood in that lobby the day they removed the sign, not to gloat, but to remember. To remember the woman who'd stood in this same spot 18 months ago, devastated by the reduction to part-time work, thinking her career was over. Ms. Hart? A young woman approached me, nervous but determined. I'm Jennifer Martinez. I was an analyst at Ardent until last week. I applied for your Future Leaders Initiative. I remember your application, I said. You were the one who reported the billing fraud internally and got written up for not being a team player. She nodded, tears threatening. They made my life hell for trying to do the right thing. Well, Jennifer, doing the right thing is exactly what we value at Hart Consulting. When can you start? As we walked out together, I caught my reflection in the lobby's polished walls. I looked different than I had 18 months ago. Not older, but sharper. Refined by fire. Forged by the very pressure that was meant to break me. Behind us, workers were already spackling over the holes where Ardent's letters had been, erasing the last physical trace of their existence. But I wasn't looking back. I had an empire to run. The final blow came from the most unexpected source, their own greed. During the bankruptcy proceedings, forensic accountants discovered that Robert and his partners had been siphoning money into offshore accounts for years. But in their panic to hide assets from the FBI, they'd made a fatal error. They'd used client funds as collateral for personal loans, thinking they could replace the money before anyone noticed. They couldn't. Pinnacle Corporation alone was missing $12 million. The prosecution added wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering to the existing charges. Robert's bail was revoked immediately. I was meeting with my leadership team when the news broke. We watched in silence as reporters surrounded Robert's wife outside their Lake Forest mansion, now tagged with federal seizure notices. Caroline, Maria said quietly. He's finished. They're all finished. She was right. The trial was swift and merciless. Former employees lined up to testify, myself included. I sat in that witness box for 3 hours, detailing the systematic discrimination, the hostile work environment, and the financial irregularities I'd observed. Ms. Hart, the prosecutor asked, why didn't you report these issues earlier? Because I needed my job, I said simply. And because people like Robert Larkin had made it clear that speaking up would end my career. They were right, it did end my career at Ardent. What they didn't anticipate was that it would begin my real career. Robert's defense attorney tried to paint me as a vindictive former employee. Isn't it true that you've benefited tremendously from Ardent's downfall? I've benefited from my own hard work, I corrected. Ardent's downfall was entirely self-inflicted. I simply refused to be buried in their rubble. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Robert got 15 years federal prison. Michael got 10. The other partners received sentences ranging from 5 to 12 years. The day of sentencing, I received a call from David Steinberg at Pinnacle. Caroline, the board has been discussing something. We want Hart Consulting to absorb all of Ardent's outstanding contracts. Every single one. Can you handle that kind of expansion? I looked out at my office. We'd just taken over the entire floor, with 75 employees and growing. We'll need to scale up significantly. Whatever you need, we'll provide transition funding. The industry needs stability. And more importantly, it needs leadership that isn't rotten to the core. Within a month, Hart Consulting had grown to 200 employees across 3 offices. We were billing more per quarter than Ardent had in their best year. But the sweetest moment came when I visited our new headquarters. It was Ardent's old building, the same 40th floor where Robert had told me I lacked gravitas, the same conference room where they'd laughed at my ambitions. Now it bore my name, Hart Consulting Global Headquarters. I kept Robert's old office exactly as it was for exactly 1 day. Then I had it gutted and rebuilt as an open collaboration space, with glass walls and natural light. No more closed doors, no more secret meetings, no more old boys club. Jennifer Martinez, the analyst who'd tried to report the fraud, now headed our ethics division. Maria was chief operating officer. James ran our data analytics department. Every single person Ardent had marginalized, overlooked, or abused now had a seat at our table. The Chicago Business Journal ran another feature, this time with a different headline. From Ashes to Empire, How Caroline Hart Built Chicago's Most Ethical Consulting Firm. But my favorite piece of press was smaller, a brief mention in the financial crimes section of the Tribune. Robert Larkin, former managing partner of defunct Ardent Strategies, has been assigned to kitchen duty at the Federal Correctional Institution in Oxford, Wisconsin. He is required to work 20 hours per week. 20 hours, the same number he'd given me, thinking it would destroy me. I had the article framed and hung it in my private bathroom, the only place where I allowed myself to be petty. Every morning, as I prepared to run a company that now influenced billions in commerce, I could glance at those words and remember. Remember that they'd tried to break me with 20 hours. Remember that those 20 hours had become 20 million in monthly billing. Remember that every attempt to diminish me had only clarified my purpose. The last time I saw Robert was at an industry conference 3 years later. Not in person, he was still in federal prison. But his son approached me during the cocktail reception, a young man in his 20s with his father's jaw but kinder eyes. "Ms. Hart," he said quietly, "I wanted to apologize for my father, what he did to you, to everyone. It was wrong." "You don't need to apologize for him," I said gently. "Children aren't responsible for their parents' choices." "He still doesn't understand," the young man continued. "He still thinks you destroyed him out of spite." I considered my words carefully. Your father destroyed himself the moment he decided that power meant stepping on others instead of lifting them up. I didn't destroy Ardent. I simply built something better and let the comparison speak for itself. As he walked away, I realized that was the truth. I hadn't set out to destroy them. I'd set out to survive, then to thrive, then to create something that made their model obsolete. Their destruction was just a natural consequence of their own choices, accelerated by their inability to adapt to a world that no longer tolerated their behavior. That night, I stood in what had been Robert's office, now filled with young consultants collaborating on a project that would help a nonprofit scale their operations. They were diverse, brilliant, and unafraid. Everything Ardent had feared. Reduced hours was their mistake, I said to the empty room, to the ghost of who I'd been 2 years ago. But my success didn't blow up their business. I smiled, watching the city lights twinkle below. Their business was already dead. I just built something better on the grave. The Chicago winter was brutal that December afternoon, wind cutting through the city like a blade of ice. I stood outside the building that had once been Ardent Strategies' kingdom, now bearing the simple, elegant letters, Hart Consulting Global. 3 years. It had been exactly 3 years since Robert Larkin had smiled his snake smile and told me 20 hours was all I was worth. 3 years since I'd walked out of his office, devastated but not defeated. Now, I walked through those same doors as the owner of one of the most successful consulting firms in the Midwest. The security guard, the same one who'd watched me carry out my box of belongings that humiliating day, nodded respectfully. "Good afternoon, Ms. Hart." "Afternoon, Thomas." I smiled. He'd been one of the first to apply when we'd announced we were hiring support staff with full benefits and equity participation. Small kindnesses remembered. Always. The elevator ride to the 40th floor was smooth, silent except for the hum of success. When the doors opened, I was greeted by controlled chaos, the beautiful kind. Teams huddled around whiteboards, solving problems that mattered. Voices in 6 different languages discussing strategy. The energy was electric, alive, everything Ardent had never been. Maria met me at my office, the corner suite, naturally, with its panoramic view of Lake Michigan. The Times wants to do a profile piece. The woman who rebuilt consulting. Interested? Pass, I said, settling into my chair. We've had enough press. Let the work speak for itself now. She grinned. That's what I told them you'd say. Oh, and Jennifer wanted me to tell you, we just passed the B Corporation certification. We're officially recognized as a business that balances profit with purpose. Purpose? Such a simple word. But one Ardent had never understood. They'd thought purpose meant power, dominance, keeping others down to stay on top. They'd never realized that true purpose meant building something that lifted everyone. My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn Grant. Watching your keynote from last week, you killed it. Proud to have been your first believer. I smiled, remembering that scared, angry woman in a Logan Square apartment, cold calling anyone who would listen. Evelyn had saved me as much as I'd saved her company. That's how real business worked. Mutual elevation, not mutual destruction. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Jennifer Martinez entered, no longer the nervous analyst but a confident executive. Caroline, I wanted to show you something. She handed me a printed email. It was from a young woman at another firm, thanking us for inspiring her to leave a toxic workplace and start her own consultancy. She says your story gave her courage, Jennifer said. That's the 15th one this month. 15 women this month who'd refused to accept 20 hours. 15 futures that wouldn't be crushed under the weight of someone else's insecurity. The ripple effect was more satisfying than any revenge could ever be. As the sun began to set, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of gold and amber, I made my way to the collaboration space that had once been Robert's temple to his own ego. A group of junior consultants was working late, their excitement palpable as they solved a particularly complex problem for a nonprofit client. Ms. Hart, one called out, could you look at this model? We think we found a way to triple their impact without increasing costs. I spent an hour with them, not directing, but collaborating, sharing insights but also learning from their fresh perspectives. This was what Ardent had feared most, a world where hierarchy meant responsibility, not dominion. As I finally prepared to leave, bundling up against the Chicago cold, I passed the spot where Ardent's mission statement had once hung. In its place was ours, simple and clear. Success is not measured by who you defeat, but by who you uplift. The elevator descended, carrying me past floors of industry and ambition, dreams and determination. When I reached the lobby, I paused at the exact spot where I'd stood 3 years ago, box in hand, career apparently in ruins. I could still feel her, that devastated version of me, wondering how she'd survive, how she'd pay her bills, how she'd ever recover from such humiliation. If I could speak to her across time, I'd tell her the truth, that sometimes the worst things that happen to us are actually the best things in disguise. That being pushed out of a toxic system isn't a punishment, it's a liberation. The wind hit me as I stepped outside, but I didn't hurry to my car. Instead, I stood there in the brutal Chicago winter, looking up at the building that bore my name, thinking about Robert in his federal cell, about Michael rebuilding his life after prison, about all the partners who'd thought themselves invincible. They'd made one critical error, the one that ultimately destroyed them. They'd confused fear with respect, power with leadership, exclusion with excellence. The 20 hours they'd given me, that hadn't been their mistake. Their mistake was thinking that 20 hours could contain someone who was meant for so much more. Their mistake was believing that reducing my hours would reduce my worth. Their mistake was assuming that a woman scorned would simply fade away. I smiled, pulling my coat tighter against the wind. Somewhere in this city, another woman was probably crying in a bathroom stall, having just been told she wasn't enough. Another person of color was being passed over for promotion. Another brilliant mind was being crushed under the weight of someone else's insecurity. To them, I had only this to say: let them reduce your hours. Let them underestimate you. Let them think they've won. Then build something so magnificent that their empire becomes nothing more than dust beneath your feet. The last thing I saw as my driver pulled away was the Heart Consulting logo illuminated against the darkening sky, a beacon in the Chicago night, a testament to what rises from the ashes of injustice. They'd given me 20 hours. I'd taken everything. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Caroline's position? Have you ever turned a setback into your greatest success? Let me know in the comments below.